16 Minutes of Care is a podcast based on the CARE principles, a strategic framework that reveals how brands create impact by caring and, as a result, grow their business. In each episode, Isabel welcomes a company executive who explains how CARE has helped their business grow successfully and sustainably.
Welcome to 16 Minutes of Care, the new podcast episode by the CARE Principles. Today I welcome Tamara Eelsing. She is the Diversity Manager at STIB MIVB, the Brussels Transport Company. Welcome back, Tamara.
Yes.
We already spoke in the previous episode a bit what is your role and how you've already are already a veteran, I would say, in diversity,
bit, yeah.
Because you also worked in diversity before in a bank. And what I was wondering, you talked about the fact that diversity is really about change management and cultural change. When you compare what you need to do now at STIB compared to the banking world, how different is that change culture?
Yeah, it is very different, especially in the sense that the whole storytelling around diversity changed for me. That was one of the biggest challenges when I was reflecting if I wanted to apply for a job at STIB. That I was thinking, okay, how am I going to sell diversity in a company where, yes, innovation is very important, but for a very small group of people, innovation and creativity is part of their daily lives. There's a huge proportion of our people who are working alone the whole day, driving a bus. How can I sell diversity, the importance of diversity to them? While in the financial institution, you are working on creativity, innovation the whole day, because banks could become obsolete if they don't innovate themselves. They could die out like the gramophone did. It's a really tricky era for them in the VUCA world. So there the storytelling was, yeah, we need more diversity because diversity brings in more perspectives. It feeds your creativity. Being more creative gets you more innovation. But at STIB it's a different story. And so there you really need to start talking about, you know, what diversity contributes to your personal life, to your ideas, to your mindset. We really want people to be happy when they come to work. And I think diversity can really influence that. But you need to manage it because people have the tendency to be attracted to people who are similar to themselves. Mm-hmm. And so that's why diversity management is necessary in a company, even with a lot of diversity, to make sure that these people get mixed up and that they get their work experience is an enriching experience.
Mm-hmm. And represents the diversity that we see in society.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me go back a little bit to the company itself, and I would like to talk to, within the CARE Principles framework, I always say CARE really starts internally. There's no use in telling your clients, for instance, how caring you are, but really start with your own employees. Now, STIB has received the Top Employer Certificate. You already won twice the Diversity Awards. There's of course many awards and certificates. Is it important, these awards and certificates? Is it something that you feel it matters?
I think it does matter. I think it's important to have a Top Employer Certificate on your website, on your job sites. It's almost a disqualifier if you don't have it, because people start wondering what is wrong with their company that they don't have the Top Employer Certificate. Do I think that it attracts a lot of candidates? I'm not quite sure. I think Top Employer Certificate is more useful in the sense that it gives you an analysis of your HR practices. And it gives you an insight in where you could improve or where the benchmark is scoring better than you are. On diversity, in general, we have outperformed the market, but it keeps you on your toes. So they ask questions, and we see also that this Top Employer questionnaire, for example, it changes each year. So equity, for example, is something that is a concept that has become more and more important. Intersectionality is a concept that has become more and more important. And so concepts like these are added to these type of questionnaires, and therefore they can really give you a retrospective view of your practices. On the other hand, I also see that there's a lot of awards or certificates that do not really have like predetermined variables. And if in diversity I find something very interesting, is to make sure that you judge people, and therefore as a company I would like to be judged on it, on something that is predefined. Because if you give an award like almost like a pay as you go, we see where we end up because we like this company, we want to give it an award. For me, that doesn't carry much weight. I want to know what is good about STIB, why are we chosen? I love this fact-based approach.
No, I kind of agree. I think there's many awards and certificates. For some people, you really don't understand anymore which ones are valuable and which ones aren't. But what I learned from these podcast interviews with other people who are leading companies is that it really helps you to, first of all, really put on paper everything you do, and so getting better at that. And
exactly.
And like you say, there's always an evolution in these certificates. You always have to do more, and so it really helps you progress. It's a kind of a tool for companies also internally to progress towards a better future. No, that's nice. Now, if we go back to in general, what we see when we talk about diversity is that most companies, they make a lot of progress, especially with new candidates coming in. So the newer generations or the younger people that are coming in, okay, there's already, in terms of cultural background, there's more diversity. In terms of gender, there's more diversity. But when you go to the top of the company and you go to the management levels, it's predominantly white, still, unfortunately, predominantly male very often, and predominantly older. How is that at STIB?
I like this question because we score quite good. I think at STIB we have a little bit of an inverse gender pyramid, because at the bottom we have a lot of men, so where we have a lot of the workers, so the bus drivers, the tram and the metro drivers, people on the work floor, the people who are doing the actual work, let's say, they are predominantly men. So we have about 7% women in that group, and for technicians we only have 2% women. So that's very low. But if you go higher, at the levels where this technical background becomes less important, where the jobs become maybe also a bit less intimidating, because I think the job as a bus driver could still be an intimidating job for women, or perceived as an intimidating job for women. Then we see that there's more and more women in the company. So at the highest levels, we see more women percentage-wise than we see women at the bottom. And our ExCom is really performing well. 4 out of 9 are women. And also 2 out of 9 have different origins. So so that's very interesting.
That's very, very good.
What I also like about our ExCom is that it's not this this group of people who just say yes. I think the CEO has chosen people in his ExCom that are different than he is, who have an opposite way of thinking, which I think improves the decision making in this team.
That's interesting, because often you see that the CEO has the yay-sayers that he has around him, and that the no-sayers are not allowed to. That's interesting. That's very nice to hear. Let's get back to your job now. You told me that when you work in diversity, you can work, of course, on the big teams, getting the teams more diverse in everything we said, in age and gender, in cultural background, and whatever. But it's also in small details. And you had a nice example of one of these details.
Yeah, actually, we have we have a target for hiring people with a handicap. We do have a lot of people within the company that are not able to do their own jobs. They are not handicapped as such. They are not getting any subsidies from the government, and we move them around in the company so that they can stay and be productive, and you know, it helps them regain their self-worth. But to hire people from the outside is a bit more difficult, because a lot of the positions where we could hire people in are taken up by the people that we move around in the company. So we have quite a low KPI of hiring people with an official handicap. That's only 5 per year. But the impact of hiring these people is enormous. Of course, we communicate about it, but the impact on the life of this very person is enormous. The impact of this person on his team is enormous. And we even see, though this seems like a detail, it seems like a very small amount, but we see more willingness, for example, for people who are already working in the company to pronounce that they have a handicap. People often hide the fact that they have handicaps, that they are in a situation of handicap, but we see more openness, we see more discussion, we see, and it seems such a small detail, but it has such a large impact on the company.
Could you give an example?
Yeah, before we didn't really talk about handicap, or people didn't come. What we see now is that people or managers run into a problem or run into a reasonable adjustment, for example, and all of a sudden they come to me and they say, how can we approach this? Or the HRBP comes to me and he says, how can we approach this? Whereas before we didn't have this concept of reasonable adjustments, which is of course a legal thing, but if they don't know where to look, it will become very difficult to integrate that in the company and to integrate that in processes. So one of the next steps that we are going to do, based on the information that we have now, is that we are going to try to get a process so that managers and workers don't have to worry about it, and that they can immediately go to HR if there's a reasonable adjustment needed, for example, to really put into place a process that helps people become independent in a way that they don't really need to talk to their manager, but they could go to a person of trust immediately.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Last question, and then in the next episodes I'll dive a bit further into the care strategic framework and talk about the client and about reliability and about collaboration. When we think about D&I, you are a D&I manager already for a long time. You worked also in another company, but there's still a lot of companies that don't have that. So what tips or tricks or insights could you give to companies that still need to start and are not going to hire a Tamara straight away? What can they do?
I met a woman yesterday and she was talking about this company that they're going to start. And you can hire a diversity manager for 10 hours per week. So that would already be a great solution for small companies that say, okay, I cannot invest in a full-time person, but I can maybe invest in a couple of hours per week to help me. So that was already a great idea.
That company is not on the market yet.
It's not yet on the market. Okay. So, but they're going to provide these type of services, not only diversity, but other services as well. So that's a very interesting concept. Too bad I didn't think about that myself. And then there's enormous source of resources on the internet. There's companies like there's organizations like UNIA who have really good websites where you can find a lot of information about diversity. There are companies that have, especially in the Brussels area, you have Actrice, and Actrice has a really great analysis and a form that you can fill out, and you can do an analysis and you can really see, okay, if we focus on these strategic points, so we want to focus on gender, LGBTQI, age, And then you can say, okay, where do I need to improve? For example, is it in your recruitment selection process? Is it in the culture, company culture? Is it in your, do you need to do something for your exit conversations? So you really need to make sure that you do an analysis and you cut it up into
practical,
because once you see
steps.
that, for example, you want to do something on ethnicity and recruitment, then you can start thinking about the action that you can take to improve. Can you do something in your employer branding? Can you do something in your role modeling? Do you need to do something about the bias in your hiring team? So but it all starts with analysis. Analysis is the key, and there's a lot of tools out there online that you can find.
Find.
Definitely.
Great tip. So that's a tip if you want to start with diversity, go online, look for those analysis tools and really start with it. And maybe if that company starts, you can hire a diversity manager for a couple of hours a week. Thank you, Tamara, for this second 16 Minutes of Care with Tamara Eelsing, the diversity manager at STIB, the Brussels transport company. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. Stay tuned because there's a third episode coming up with Tamara. Thank you and take care.
Want to create lasting impact with your brand while feeding sustainable growth? Check out 𝗃𝗏𝗄𝗎𝗓 and see how we can help you. 16 Minutes of Care is an independent production from 𝗃𝗏𝗄𝗏, brand strategist, founder of the Care Principles, and author of the book, Does Your Brand Care? Help us reach more companies who are looking for caring and sustainable growth by giving this podcast all the stars it deserves and by sharing it in your network. Thank you and take care.